for people in the northern half of Gaza to leave as it continues intense airstrikes across the territory. Troops are massed on the border with Gaza ahead of an expected ground incursion. The Israeli Defense Force say that they have struck over 100 military targets overnight and killed a senior commander. Militants have continued to fire rockets into Israel towards Tel Aviv and other areas in the south. The World Health Organization has condemned Israel's evacuation order. It says forcing hospital patients to relocate would be a death sentence. President Biden has spoken with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and urged him to provide safety for civilians amid the bombardment. Diplomatic efforts to prevent the violence from spreading have been stepped up. Mr. Biden's Secretary of State Antony Blinken is visiting Cairo. He's expected to press Egyptian officials to restart talks on getting aid into Gaza through the border crossing. The US is sending a second aircraft carrier to the eastern Mediterranean near Israel. The USS Eisenhower will lead a group of ships aimed at deterring further attacks against Israel, in particular from Iran or the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. Well, let's cross now to our Middle East correspondent, Yolande Nell. And Yolande, just talk us through the latest that you're hearing. We've been hearing about the intensified clashes on Israel's northern border with Lebanon. And obviously we're hearing about Israel extending this time period that it's given Gazans to leave the north of Gaza. Just talk us through the developments as they've been coming in over the last few hours.
Well, earlier the Israeli military said that it was giving another 3-hour window for residents of the northern half of the Gaza Strip to make their way south along a route which it declared to be safe. And we have seen in the past couple of days now hundreds of thousands of people making that journey, some of them on foot with their belongings just in carrier bags or in rucksacks, some people with carts, with donkeys, other people with cars using up what little fuel they have left because, of course, Gaza remains under this tight siege by Israel with no food, no water, no electricity and no fuel being allowed in. Now there is growing concern about the humanitarian situation, particularly in the south of the Strip, where you have all of these people really in makeshift shelters, in UN schools, places like that. They're extremely crowded, and with no aid getting in, there's really very limited means for the very limited number of emergency workers in the Gaza Strip to be able to help them. Another complication here is that the lack of internet, the lack of people with working phones, so communication becomes more and more difficult. We know that the World Health Organization has been raising awareness of these 20 hospitals in the northern half of the Gaza Strip, where it said that the evacuation order given by Israel was really tantamount to a death sentence. There are very sick and injured people there, and at the moment there are still babies in incubators, things like that, and they're asking how are these people supposed to be moved. This is all complicating, of course, Israel's plans for a ground offensive. It wants as many people to leave the north of the Gaza Strip, particularly Gaza City, which we expect to be a real focus. It wants that area cleared as much as possible before it goes in, saying it's going to tackle both the Hamas military and governing capabilities.
And what has Israel been saying too? There's clearly a mounting pressure on it to provide safe passage for civilians. We've had President Biden talking about an obligation to provide safety for civilians. And as you say, the World Health Organization really strongly condemning these calls for hospitals patients to have to move. What is Israel saying in its defense?
Well, Israel is saying that it is Hamas's responsibility as the government in Gaza to help people move. Hamas has been telling people not to leave their homes. And when I asked the Israeli military spokesman about this, he told me that really Hamas had got cars, Hamas had got vehicles that it could move people, and that really it should get involved here. At the same time, of course, yes, there is big pressure on Israel from surrounding countries. Jordan has called for humanitarian corridors. There's a lot of aid which has already arrived in the Sinai in Egypt. That's aid that could easily be taken into the Gaza Strip if Egypt was to open the Rafah crossing. Now, Egypt has said it's not going to do that to allow hundreds of people who have foreign nationalities who are stuck in Gaza. It's not going to allow them out until it gets some guarantees that aid can also safely be taken into the Gaza Strip. So that's the situation at the moment, and we know that the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken on his trip, which really defines shuttle diplomacy, he's been going from country to country around the region, That's one of the big efforts that he's involved in, is trying to get the Rafah crossing open. Also, you mentioned earlier about Hezbollah in the north. There's real concern there in the north of Israel about what could happen with new firing by both sides, and really a lot of concern that this conflict could spread more widely in the region. That's something that Antony Blinken has been talking to different regional actors about as well, trying to get them to put some pressure on the different players where they have some influence. In the last few hours, at least one Israeli has been killed, and a couple of civilians also have been injured, we understand, by anti-tank missiles. But at the moment, Hezbollah is not using its longer-range missiles. If it gets involved, that is going to really change this, because it is a very powerful force with a huge arsenal of longer-range weapons.
OK, thank you very much. You'll land now for us there.